Now let's look at a crab. So a crab is a really easy creature to create. Basically, it's one large oval for the body and then two smaller split ovals for the big claws, and then some lines coming out from the sides of the body for the small claws, and a couple of big eyes at the top of the head there. So really easy to cut out this shape, and I think this cloth here is a great crab color. So I will cut out that oval for the body and then the two smaller ovals for the claws. And I'm not even going to bother to cut out the splits in them. I'll use thread to create that line in the claws just because it's a little bit less fiddly. And now I'm going to look on my scroll, which is really starting to fill in well, to find a good spot for my crab. And I think it'll go here, and it shows up nicely on the dark cloth. I'm sure that those two little claws are going to fall off and go missing. I'm going to start out by sewing on the body there just with a whip stitch, overhand stitch around and around, around and around and around, all the way around the body. Having the cloth with those kind of mottled pinky orange colors really gives a lot of texture and interest rather than having just a solid color there. It it looks so much more realistic if you use a patterned piece of cloth rather than just a solid color. I really like this technique of combining embroidery with applique like this to create somewhat realistic looking cartoonish creatures that have lots of depth and personality. As I expected, those little claws have gone missing, and I'm going to have to track them down before I can sew them on. I've gone all the way around the body of the crab, and oh look, good, good. Didn't go too far astray there. I found that first claw, and it will be connected to the body with a thinner arm and the claw out at the ends. I just used stem stitch, but I'm going to go back and forth a few times to build up the thickness of the leg there. But you know, you could use any stitches you like, back stitch, stem stitch, or even chain stitch to connect that big claw to the body there. I'm stitching the claw down there using just the same whip stitch over and over and over again to secure the edge. So I want the edges to be stay fairly smooth, so I'm just doing a whip stitch that will keep the edges of the cloth contained. I think I'm just going with the orange thread, some of the leftover orange thread from my shrimp. I'm building up the bulk of the leg of this that attaches this claw here, and I'll just go back and forth till I think it's bulky enough, it's wide enough for my cloth, and no real rhyme or reason, just whatever I feel like. And it's just the same way that when I'm cutting out the piece of cloth, I'll just cut out the shape and then refine it a little bit. I do the same thing with stitches, but in the opposite way. I'll add some stitching, and if I think that doesn't look substantial enough, I'll add a little bit more until I feel like it's got the weight that I want. And now I'm going on to those smaller claws, the smaller legs, and I checked it out, and it looks like crabs have four of these on either side. So again, with some straight stitches, stem stitch, and then just one straight stitch to make the joint, the angle of the joint, so that they're just not straight. But if you'd rather have them straight, you can do that. And I realized that on this side, these stitches in the orange are not really showing up that well against that reddish and yellow background. So what I can do later on, if I wanted to, is I can add some more definition by going back with a darker color thread and defining them a little bit more so that they stand out a little bit more, or maybe I won't worry about it. I think on the other side where the legs are going to be sitting on the darker cloth, they'll show up a lot more, and not everything has to be right in your face. Some things can be a little bit more subtle. And now I've gone over to the other side and I am adding the other four legs. And basically the the order that I'm doing this in is determined by whereabouts I am on the cloth when I come to the next part. So I was near the top when I finished sewing around my crabs, so I decided that the closest thing to work on next would have been one of the big claws that are near the top. So when I finished that, I finished off the rest of the legs that were on that side of the crab, and then I moved over to the other side of the crab because that was the shortest distance for to come over to this side, and I'm working on the lower legs here because that's where I was. And again, I can go back and forth as much as I need to make these as bulky or as substantial as I feel like I want them to be. I want them to be fairly delicate. I don't want them to be as big as the big claws, but I also don't want them to be really skimpy either. And when I finish those claws, now I'm adding the next big claw near the top there. And I'll do the same thing that I did before, go around with whip stitch. And I was thinking about lobsters. Now, I haven't done a lobster yet, but I'm thinking about how they're really kind of other than the size, obviously lobsters are much bigger than a shrimp, and about the same size as a crab, but you could create a lobster if you wanted to, and I would encourage you to try to figure this out. But it's kind of a combination of a crab with those big claws up at the top and a shrimp. So if you think about making the shrimp shape, but then adding those big claws, I think that would be a really cool looking lobster. Give it a try, see what happens. And I've gone just like I did on the other side, I've gone back and forth and connected the big claw on this side to the body of the crab, and that's pretty much it. And just like I did with the shrimp, I will go back in later on and add some French knots near the top there between the two claws for the eyes. And at this point I decided that I wanted to make the legs a little bit bulkier, but I've changed my thread color. I'm using pink now instead of the orange that I'd started out with, and that will give a little bit more variety to the legs there and make them show up a little bit more. So if the orange was quite dark, then this lighter pink will help the legs to show up and be more visible on the dark side, and then on the lighter side where I've got that orangey kind of reddish yellow color on the other side, I could add dark threads to the legs on that side to bulk them up. And basically I'm really just using up whatever thread that I had lying around. So just going right beside what I had done before on either side, adding more in. And this is my process. I just add more of things. If I look at things and I think, oh, that doesn't look quite right, instead of taking it out, I think, what more can I add? And I add something else. And in this case, I'm adding some lighter thread. And maybe that's not going to give the look that I want, so maybe I'll go back and add some darker thread after that. But for now, I think that my crab is looking quite good. I'm quite happy with it. It's a little lopsided, but doesn't have to be perfect, and things are always in motion, so they're not perfectly symmetrical. Things are in life, things are always kind of off-centered like that. Anyway, thanks for watching and happy stitching, and I'll see you in the next video.